Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Sorry, I was just trying to make sure the video was shared in all the right places this morning. So thank you so much for being patient as we're getting ready for this morning. I see we have a couple of people logged on. So just as we're getting ready for starting today, sorry, I just noticed my glasses in the light look terrible. So as we're getting ready this morning, if you can just go ahead and say hi, introduce yourself, tell us what your name and where you're at. That way then we can know who we're talking to. It would help. And as we are talking today, please feel free to pose your questions in the chat box, and I will make sure that myself or Tony answer your questions as we go through the session. I'm going to also share a link to the article that we're covering today, just in case you didn't see it already. It's actually published on our website right now, and it's titled A Closer Look at the 2019 Legislative Session. So if you need a link to that article, I'll be sharing it in the chat box here in just a minute. So give us just a few more minutes to let people log in and find the link, and then we'll get started. So thank you. All right, people are already saying hi. All right, good morning, everyone. Hi. Okay, we've got people from all over Texas, Gainesville, San Angelo, Grand Prairie. Well, welcome, guys. So glad you guys are here to join us this morning. We're gonna start talking here in about 1 minute. I just want to make sure that people have a minute to find us this morning, and then we'll get started. All right. Conroe. Hi, Barb and Alicia, Tyler. Good morning. Okay. All right. Well, I think it's time for us to get started. And let me just start off with, we're sorry for any of the outside noise that you might be hearing today. You may or may not know this, but the Texas Capitol Complex is getting completely renovated and updated, and so we have construction on almost every side of our building. There is like no quiet space in our offices right now. It's great and it's exciting because we'll have lots of new facilities available for the state office complex, but for now it's lots of honking and lots of banging and hammering and drilling, and so anyway, perfect timing. We have a trucker outside honking as we're trying to talk. It's awesome. So anyway, let me introduce myself. My name is Christine Anderson. I am the Public Affairs and Communications Manager for the Texas Real Estate Commission and for the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board. And I'm joined here this morning by none other than Tony Slagle, our Deputy Executive Director for TREC and Deputy Commissioner for TALCD. Thank you so much for taking some time this morning to join us.
No problem.
We're excited to have you here and hear what you have to say. So this morning, just in case you weren't aware, we're going to be covering all things legislative session. Tony wrote a great article that kind of details any of the bills that TREC and TALCB were tracking or that may have affected the agency in some way. And so today we're just kind of give you a little bit of an overview and dive into some of the details of some of those bills and how they may affect your business. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tony, and he'll get started.
Yeah, I just would like to say just from the start that the bills in the article weren't the only bills we were looking at. There's some internal administrative things that apply to all state agencies that obviously the license holders aren't necessarily interested in. So those weren't included in the article, but they do impact internal things that we do for public information requests or contracting, things of that nature. This article was focused primarily on things that would impact the license holders in some way, form, or fashion. And so I just wanted to make that clarification.
So we have other things happening other than the stuff in this bill, in this article.
But it's again, it's
but how we
inside
process
baseball stuff.
Yeah, how we process public information requests might not be all that interesting.
Right, or what we have to do in terms of sign off for contracts or things.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
So anyway, so as I mentioned in my article, it was a really busy session overall. There were a lot of bills filed. We were busier than normal in terms of the bills we were looking at. And the big sort of elephant in the room, if you will, was the sunset bill for the agency that was a direct result of the Sunset Commission review of the agency and the report that was filed last December. And before I get into any of the specifics about the bill, I just want to address kind of two things with that report. They're actually one thing, but two items. There are recommendations that are statutory recommendations, which is what the Sunset Bill implemented. And then there are management actions in that report as well, which we also need to do and implement. And I just wanted to touch base on a couple of those management items because they may be of interest to the license holders out there. The most significant one was a requirement that the agency look at inspector education and streamline the inspector education to better align with the national inspector exam. And so we've agency staff and the inspector committee has worked really hard on doing that, and there will be a lot of bills up for the commission to consider at its August meeting based on that review and the recommendations. But that was a management action in the Sunset Report. And the other one that I think is worth mentioning is the requirement that we revise our metrics, how we report, and record what we do on a daily basis, licensing stats and that nature. And the agency has done that. The policymakers, board, and commissioners have weighed in on that. And we have revised our metrics. And moving forward, we are hoping to have better ways to provide that information to the policymakers and to the public.
So, and just in case you didn't know, those attending, we actually publish monthly staff reports on statistics on processing information, licensing counts, complaint information, really helpful stuff that you might not know we actually have on our website. So I'm going to share the link to those reports that Tony's kind of talking about. And then we also have required reports that are metrics he's talking about that we report to the commission and board on a quarterly basis as well. So I encourage you, when you're seeing the notices about the commission or board meeting, that data and that information is also provided to the commission and board in the meeting materials. So that's where you can find that. So I'll put the links to both of those things in the chat box over here while Tony's talking.
Okay, so the other aspect of the Sunset report, obviously, are legislative changes. I will try to make this as entertaining as possible because
it's very entertaining.
The legislative things tend to be a bit dry. So anyway, I would like to, I guess, start with the big one, which was the Sunset Bill. As the article pointed out, there are bullet points listed on sort of the major changes that bill enacted. One that I think has caused a little bit of confusion from people is the repeal of our authority to license instructors for providers. So the Sunset Bill removes that authority. We, as of the date of the Sunset Bill, or I think September 1st.
It's September 1st.
Will no longer be licensing instructors for providers. We do, however, still have the ability and the authority to ensure that the instructors that providers are using meet certain requirements and certain, so they won't be licensed by us, but the providers need to ensure that they meet various requirements in order to do that. And it'll be on the providers, the onus is on the providers to ensure that happens. And the way we will ensure that the providers are doing that is through, an audit process by which we will be going out and or not necessarily going out, but reviewing what providers are doing from time to time to ensure that they are in fact using instructors that are qualified to be teaching the courses.
We actually we have an instructor feedback form that we use that people can, license holders, when they take a course. It'll be even more essential that we basically get the feedback from you all, so that when you take a course and an instructor may or may not be up to par, we know that, so that when we do start auditing the providers, we'll kind of have a little bit more feedback on that.
And that form is required. All providers are required to provide that to students taking the courses to fill out.
Yeah, and look for more information on that change as far as like you as a student might be interested. We're going to be covering a little bit more on that later on, probably sometime in September. We'll be, obviously, when the changes to the licensing requirements are in effect September 1, our website will be updated showing that reflection, and then also kind of helping guide our license holders that are taking courses from providers to guide them towards the feedback form, as well as kind of know more about who's in charge of the instructors now and how that process works. Right. So look out for that coming soon.
So the other thing, I guess that impacts the license holders in a way is the elimination of the branch office license. Currently, if you have a branch office, you're required to submit an application to get a separate license for each branch office. The Sunset Bill eliminates that requirement.
Yeah.
So any branch office licenses that are currently issued are in effect until the expiration of that license. But as of September 1st, we will no longer be issuing branch licenses, and there won't be a requirement that you get licensed to be or have your branch offices.
So that means if somebody has a branch office license that expires in January of 2020, that license is still valid.
Right.
That license holder does not need to do anything with the branch office license, but they will not need to renew that license.
Absolutely will not need to renew.
Yeah.
We will not be accepting new applications.
Yeah, as of September 1 again, right? We will not be accepting new applications for that. So again, that'll be reflected on the website as well.
Okay. And then the other thing worth mentioning, kind of grouped within this, is the repeal of the residency requirements. So currently, you're required to be a Texas resident for certain licenses. There are certain licenses that the statute doesn't speak to that. And so that inconsistency was the driving force behind this, and there's no longer a residency requirement in the statute that you be a requirement that you be a Texas resident in order to be licensed. There is, again, sort of a way for the agency to ensure various geographic competency issues. So,
because we don't want somebody from New York.
Yeah, you need to be able to speak to your area of expertise. And so, there is a distinction between someone who's selling a house in Houston and someone who's selling a house in Lubbock.
Right.
So we do have that authority to still ensure that there is geographic competency in regard to that, and that would likely be on the disciplinary side if we get a complaint and we see that that's an issue.
Right.
We're not going to be going out and tasking people day to day, make sure that they, pop quizzes or something like that.
Yeah.
It'll be on the disciplinary side.
But a broker applying for a license and they're licensed in Oklahoma, for example, no longer needs to prove that they also have a residence in the state of Texas in order to apply for a license. Okay. So that's a big change. I know, at least in my anecdotal experience with license holders calling, or people that would like to be a license holder, that will affect a lot of people.
Yeah. So, okay. So those are sort of the big repealers. There's a couple of other items listed in the article I'll just touch briefly upon. So there is a directive in the statute that gives the commission the ability to dismiss a complaint if it's determined to be inappropriate or without merit. So that's something that we're working on ways to determine that. We do want some consistency in that, so that it's not just there's a bit of a judgment call there, but there also needs to be consistency as well. There's a requirement that we maintain the confidentiality of complaints.
So that means that somebody can't call and ask a question about a pending investigation
Well,
or
no.
Okay.
What this is about is, so currently, you can't file a complaint anonymously,
Got it.
right? That's a requirement.
Right.
You have to have a signed complaint. What this does is, in the initial notice to the person who's the subject of the complaint, because we provide that, the statute requires the confidentiality of the complainant at that time to be kept.
Okay.
So, and it's only at that time, I think, with an understanding that there's due process issues, that you
Right.
have you have the right to face your accuser, that sort of thing. So we're working on ways to ensure that we comply with that particular part of the statute going forward. That on that initial notice, we will keep that information confidential.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And then finally, well, I take that back. There's another one. Sorry.
Just kidding.
Yeah, we the other thing that the statutory changes gives us the authority to do is to deny a renewal of a license if the person who's applying for renewal is in violation of a disciplinary action. So we didn't necessarily have that authority in the past. So now, if we have a disciplinary action against them, an order, and they're in violation of that order, we now have the ability. It's not mandatory, but we have the ability to take that action and deny the renewal.
So that means, like, if they had an agreed order or a payment that they hadn't made and they're then up for renewal, we can take action and say, we're not going to approve your renewal until you're paid up.
And there's other obviously other disciplinary actions as well. But that is that grants us the authority to do that.
That's great.
Okay, and now finally, there's some extra requirements added to our SDSI statute, Chapter 1105 of the Occupations Code, just to make sure that our reporting requirements. I can't remember off the top of my head how many SDSI agencies there are.
I think there's 9.
I think you're right about that. So
it's pretty rare.
There are 3 statutes governing those 9 entities, and not all the reporting requirements are the same. So this conforms our reporting requirements to the what's typically known as the SDSI Act, to give us some additional reporting that we need to submit to the powers that be, the governor's office, comptroller, things of that nature. So.
All right. Well, cool. Sorry, I was replying to somebody. Okay, so as far as that, and as far as SDSI goes, is there anything else that people need to know about SDSI agencies that came out of this session?
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. There is previously we had the authority to purchase a building. That's been removed from the statute, but with an understanding that SCIS agencies are a special kind of creature of the legislature, there was a bill filed that provides a process by which an SCIS agency can seek to, if they need to, purchase property. And there's various requirements in terms of running it by the governor's office, various certain plans you have to do, getting the facilities commission involved in all of that in order to get the approval to move forward with any sort of building or construction projects.
Okay. Cool.
And that applies to all SDSI agencies.
Perfect. Just us, Awesome. All right. So is there anything else that we should be talking about today?
Sure.
There's nothing else that happened at the legislative session, right, Tony?
Right. Well, there's
the stars.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, a big one is there's some new language that was added to the seller's disclosure. There was a lot of movement this session based on things that happened because of Hurricane Harvey, to ensure that people who are purchasing property in various flood zones or in areas that are prone to that sort of stuff are given the proper disclosures from the buyer, from the seller, with regard to those items. So there were 2 bills filed that essentially did the same thing in amending the seller's disclosure. and they require information to be noted on self-disclosure regarding a 100-year floodplain, water damage due to flood and not due to flood, so they distinguish the types of water damage, whether or not there's been any assistance from FEMA, whether there's flood insurance on the property. The broker lawyer committee has met and has made essentially mirrored the statutory changes to the self-disclosure, and that will be up, I guess, for approval.
I think it's yeah.
It's just done. So anyway, there's do you know when it'll be available for use?
I think we're finalizing some of the changes, the text changes. There was a couple of formatting changes, things like that. Once that's done, that'll be published on the website, and then I will make sure that we publish it and blast it out to everyone that needs to know, so that you all are using the correct and updated form as soon as we possibly have it available.
Right.
So make sure that this is a good time for me to plug. Make sure that you're signed up for all of our GovDelivery messaging system, our newsletter, as well as we have a bunch of other categories of content that we send out regular updates on. That where you sign up for that is on the slider. There's like a banner that pops up on our home screen that says, "Are you interested in hearing more from us?" Go ahead and sign up for that, and then in there you can kind of maintain the kind of content that you want to hear about from us. Excuse me. And we'll make sure that we send that out. But also our newsletter every month that we send out has all of that in there as well. It's kind of an overview of everything we've done for that month. So if you're reading that, you will see it and know that it's available. So if you don't mind, Tony, I have a question from Sheila Torres.
Mm-hmm.
She said, we've heard that there's going to be an increase in CE hours for renewal, with some of those being live classroom hours. Yes or no? Please advise.
I know that there's been some discussion about that, but I don't believe there's anything that's been.
And that would be the Education Standards Advisory Committee proposing that to the commission, right?
It would be. I don't believe there's been anything official.
Formally
I think
proposed.
Thank you. I think there's discussions about it. The statute allows the commission to look at increasing CE hours, but it caps it at 3 hours for every renewal cycle. So
so right now it's 18 hours.
It would, and if there was a proposal in place, it'd go up to
21.
Right.
So so basically, Sheila, there's no direct answer for that other than that if you are interested in knowing more or following along in that conversation, a good committee to kind of chime in on and listen to the discussion would be the Education Standards Advisory Committee. That committee meets quarterly as well. We post all of their agendas, meeting materials, things like that in advance, just like we do for the commission on our meetings and minutes page. I tagged that page earlier in the comments section, so go ahead and go back to there and you can see when their next meeting is. But you can see the agenda, see if they're going to be talking about adding CE hours for renewal. But what will happen is that Education Standards Advisory Committee, which is made up of education providers as well as brokers, they'll discuss it and then make recommendations to the commission that then will be proposed and then out for proposal for a while. And then at the next meeting, they will discuss, possibly adopt, depending on the feedback that we get from the public. So you would know that that was coming if that was something that was proposed, I guess is the very long answer.
To the extent that we find out after this particular Facebook Live that there's additional information, can we add it to this? Or
I could absolutely add some comments here. We'll share it. Obviously, if there's any sort of movement towards that, I would say a good way to key in and make sure that you're following all of that is to key in on that Education Standards Advisory Committee. I would think that that's where it would come from if it's going to be proposed. So I wanted to take a minute, Tony, if you don't mind. We have a couple of commissioners here on today's session. I know Commissioner Leonard and Commissioner Wilkinson are both here joining us. So good morning, commissioners. Glad to have you join us this morning. And sorry if there's any other commissioners that have gone by that I didn't see, but we're glad to have you guys on here. And just for anyone else that's attending, know that you're in good company. So we'll get back to it. So what else do you have today?
So this is an interesting bill, HB 1342, which passed. So what it does is it prohibits any state agency, occupational licensing agency, from revoking a license based on criminal conviction unless that conviction is directly related to the crime. Is directly related to the duties of and responsibilities of a licensed occupation.
So it's less arbitrary.
Right. So there has to be a direct,
Correlation.
relationship to the duties of the license. What that entails is the agency going in and looking, taking some time to look at our rules to determine that we are the things we're looking at in terms of any disciplinary action are directly related.
Right.
So both the commission and the board are in the process of doing that, in the process of reviewing the rules to determine where there needs to be tweaks, if any, and then they will move forward with those recommendations to the larger policymaking bodies, the board of the commission, to propose those changes and then eventually adopt them.
So that's SB 37, and
No,
I think
that's not.
Oh, sorry.
SB 14 or 1342.
1342. See, this is why Tony's around. He's keeping me in line. But just again, I think what you're getting at is those changes haven't necessarily been reflected in our rules yet, but those will be proposed and reviewed publicly via the commission when the time comes.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just a determination of
that's TREC and TALCB.
Both,
Excuse
both
me,
of them.
I misspoke. Right.
It's both of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So TREC and TALCB will be reviewing any rules that are related to that, but that's so if we can't deny somebody's license or because of a felony that has no relation to the duties and requirements of a license holder, correct?
Yeah. The crime must be related.
Okay.
That's the statutory
right.
requirement. So.
All right. Let's see. Oh, we're saying hi to the commissioner. We have a inspector committee member, David Motley, is here.
Hi, David.
Tony knows him very well. So thanks for joining us this morning, guys. Okay, moving on.
So the next bill would be SB 37, and this is the one that deals with anyone who's delinquent on a student loan.
Okay.
So as most of you know, there's a question on the renewal app and the initial app about whether or not you're delinquent on a student loan, and various and what the agency's response to that is that we have the authority to deny or revoke a license based on that.
That's that question when you do your renewal is a TG hold question that's on your renewal.
That is no longer the case. So the agency will not be asking the question. The forms, the online, I believe the online application, all of that's been updated.
Yeah, it's already gone.
That went into effect immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be reflective on the website and the online apps and everything that's no longer a requirement.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Easy.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to, what is it, SB 1995?
Right. Another interesting bill. So without getting too much into the weeds on this bill, it sets up a division in the governor's office to review rules that the guiding thing that requires this division to look at rules is whether they affect market competition. So
and this is not just for TREC.
No,
it's not like just TREC has
This is all occupational license, and there's a history to that. Again, not getting into too much of the weeds, but there is the court case in dealing with North Carolina dental board and policy making bodies in which the majority of the people on them, so the commissioner of the board, are license holders.
Right.
And so there's a concern due to this case that they want to make sure that there's not anything that's directly impacting market competition, that the rules are in fact fair and consistent. So
what does that mean for us?
Well, it means that once this division is set up, which I don't believe it is yet, the governor's office will do that. And once the division is set up, when we have rules that affect market competition, we need to send them over to the governor's office for review. And the division, the governor's office, has the ability to hold a hearing, to receive comments, all sorts of things. and we'll get feedback from that division before the agency is able to take action
Okay.
on those proposed rules.
So something like limiting licensing or making, I'm just making up an example here. Let's say we decide that it's going to take X amount of years to become a broker in the state of Texas, and we're making it much, 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 much harder to get a license, a broker's license. Would that be something that would need to be reviewed?
Definitely. Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Okay.
So,
they would consider that limitation.
There's
okay.
just sort of a two-part process. So obviously we have the feedback from our stakeholders to us, but then the governor's office, this new division, will have the ability to receive additional feedback as well. But again,
it's just kind of a check on us.
Yeah, we can't take any,
not us, just in general.
occupational licenses.
Right.
Yeah. So we can't, or any other occupational licensing agency can't take action on those rules until we get clearance from the governor's office.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. All right. And hi, S.J. Swanson from the Broker Lawyer Committee. We're so glad that you're here and take time to review our contracts. We just saw you, I think it was last week that you were here at the agency. So thanks for joining us this morning. All right. Keep going. We're on SB 1200.
So that bill, if you're following along at home, is a bill dealing with military spouses. So as most of you know, if you've been paying any attention to this stuff, and I do because it's my job, maybe you don't because it's not the most exciting.
Don't we all just sit at home reading every bill that is ever proposed?
The legislature over the last several sessions has worked towards making licensing for military, active military members, vets, and spouses of active military members easier. The thought there is that people who are licensed in another state working under that license, and then they move because they've been stationed to Texas, how do you make that transition easier? So this is one of those bills. It essentially grants the spouse of someone who's actively serving in the military who's been stationed here the ability to operate under the authority of their license in another state in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Without getting licensed here, here's a caveat, if the license in the other state is substantively similar to the one in Texas.
There's not a lot in the country that are similar, correct?
Well, in terms of real estate, but there's probably some allowances on inspectors and appraisers. I know appraisers have reciprocity already. But what this bill does is it allows the spouse of someone who's actively serving to come to Texas. They have to notify the agency and provide certain documentation. Oddly enough, one of them is proof of Texas residency. Then they can, once we give them the okay, and part of that is determining that they're actively licensed in this other jurisdiction,
right,
and that they're in good standing, then we give them the okay. Now, the interesting thing here is even though the bill grants that particular person the authority to operate in Texas without a license, it also grants the agency the ability to provide a license. And I think the reason for that is, if you're walking around with a letter from the agency and trying to, conduct business, it'd be difficult. So we're in the process of developing rules that would allow us to do that, to issue a license. The license would be basically our confirmation that they have met the requirements of the statute.
Yeah.
They have to meet all other legal requirements to operate in the state of Texas. So if let's say someone did come in under this and they got and they want to be a sales agent, they'd have to be sponsored. They couldn't work and not be sponsored
because some states don't have that requirement.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So that is things of that nature.
Which is when it gets really tricky for us.
For an inspector, they would need to supply us with proof of liability insurance. So there are certain things they have to do, but the bill is, I believe, up for proposal at the commission.
The rules,
I'm sorry,
not the bill.
Thank you. The rules are up for proposal at the commission meeting and the board meeting, so the stakeholders can look at them and provide any.
And that's at the August meetings.
Thank you.
And just to make sure everyone knows, just in case you don't, the August commission and board meetings are coming up. I again posted the meetings minutes pages on in this chat. It's much earlier in the session. But again, if you're looking for information about any of the rules that may be proposed because of these bills that Tony's going over, it might be a good place to start is check out the agenda when it's posted and see what we're proposing. And, as somebody that's not an attorney nor has much experience in the legal field, I understand that sometimes it's intimidating to try to read through an agenda like that and totally understand what you're looking at. So again, if you have questions about when a rule is proposed, we are always available to answer those questions. So you can reach out to us on our Facebook page, Twitter, or you can also send us an email. At the end of this session, I'll make sure that Tony and I post our actual email, our personal, not personal emails, but our actual Trek emails, so that y'all can reach out to us with any questions. And then also I encourage you to ask your questions here today in the chat box so that everyone else that's attending this session can benefit from your questions. So don't be shy. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, I threw Tony off.
No, I was trying to think. I was for those certain people watching, I was going to also mention I am not an attorney.
Yeah, you're not well, because Tony likes to remind everyone he's not an attorney, even though he speaks very much like an attorney.
Yeah. So it's kind of a running joke.
Yes.
That a lot of people assume I'm an attorney, and then I have to burst their bubble, if you will.
He's not an attorney, everyone.
So
it's obvious I'm not. Him, maybe questionable.
So moving on to the next bill, which is SB 1217. So that's a very simple bill. It just prohibits any occupational state agency from considering an arrest that did not result in a conviction or did not result in placement of deferred adjudication community service in determining the person's fitness for a license. So I don't believe we currently do that, look at an arrest that didn't result in a conviction. I think that's something that we have always shied away from, but this just makes it clear and consistent across all licensing entities that they cannot, if there's not a conviction or arrest, you can't consider an arrest without the convictions.
Okay. All right, last one on our article. Go ahead.
Yes, this is the one that allows,
this is SB 27, by the way.
So essentially what this would allow someone to do who is subject to a disciplinary action by the agency, any licensing agency, but I'll just speak to us, that if an ALJ, that's an administrative law judge at a hearing, or a judge at a contested, not a contested case, the court, so there's, I forget what the term is, that's why I'm not an attorney, someone who's challenging the ruling of an administrative law judge. If in either of those times it's determined that the action taken by the agency is frivolous, then this allows the license holder to recover costs and fees, damages, if you will, and it caps it at $1 million.
Okay.
So
it's a check on us to make sure.
It's a check on us to make sure we're not just, doing willy-nilly doing things. I don't believe we are.
Which we like to do.
Yes. But again,
sarcasm, by the way, that was not a comment.
This does apply to all licensing entities. Want to make sure that everyone knows that outside of the first two bills that we're dealing with, our sunset bill and the SCSI bill, all the rest of these apply across the board to all licensing agencies and entities.
So we came to the end of all the bills that Tony covered in his article. Okay. Emily says, I just want to verify that complaints can no longer be submitted as anonymous. The complaint must disclose their name, right? Actually, it's always been for our agency that you need to sign a complaint in order to submit it. We cannot accept anonymous complaints and never have been able to do that.
So regardless of that confidentiality provision, we can't. Just our statute says we don't accept anonymous complaints. They have to be signed.
Now we do get a lot of confusion. Sorry, Tony. We do get a lot of confusion between us and the Association of Realtors. That I do believe that they have a separate complaint process that we have no jurisdiction over or part of. And I think that they do allow for anonymous complaints. So sometimes people get that confused. So don't combine those two. We have always needed a signed complaint, and we still always do.
Right.
This change is just
this is just a notice to
Yeah.
the person who's subject of the complaint that initial notice will not include identifying information to that person. Again,
so when the notice to the complainant,
right? So not the complaint, the person
respondent,
the respondent. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was trying not to use terms
Sorry.
because people didn't know.
Yes.
But that's okay. Yes, the respondent. So if someone files a complaint with us and we reach out as part of the process to let the person know the complaint's been filed against them, that initial notice will keep that person's identity, to the extent possible, confidential.
Yeah.
Any subsequent communications with the respondent, the person who's subject to the complaint, that particular aspect, the confidentiality, doesn't apply per the statute. It's
Right.
only on that initial notice.
And just in case you weren't aware of some of our procedures as far as confidentiality for complaint process, so even though the complaint is signed and not anonymous, we as an agency never disclose information about pending investigations. We never give out information to anyone other than the people involved in the complaint, and that is only handled by our enforcement staff. In fact, Tony and myself don't even have access to that information. So rest assured that those complaints are held with confidentiality
Until completed.
Right. And then after that, we do have a tool on our website. So once all the steps have been covered and everything's been made official, then we have on our website published all final actions in our disciplinary tool that I'll link to as well, just in case you're interested in that. We do publish all of that information, and that is also published in our newsletter. And I will say, most of the time, that's the click that most people make in our newsletter, is they're interested in. It's a great educational opportunity as well. So just keeping that in mind. Let's see, we have another question. Okay, so she's happy with that. And then Rachel, you post the difference between TREC and TAR complaint process. Oh, thanks, Rachel. That's awesome. That's very helpful. I didn't even know that was there. So I think that looks like it's on the Texas Realtors website. So that's helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. But yeah, there are some differences in that process. And I believe the association has a different set of, or in addition, a set of ethics, and so there's violations there that we don't have jurisdiction over as well. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about complaint process. We are limited to the statute and the authority that we're given. So
one thing I did want to address, since we're talking legislative things, is about the plumbing board, because I think
that's really helpful. Great.
So as some of you may know, the plumbing board was up for sunset this session, and the statutes governing the licensing of plumbing were also up. And
just like us, right? They went through the same process.
And the way the sunset process works is it's a ticking clock. So at the end of that clock, if you don't reset it, then the agency goes away. So if no action is taken, there needs to be an affirmative action taken on extending the life of that agency.
Yeah.
At the end of the session, that did not happen for the plumbing board. So at the end of the session, it was the plumbing board was going the way of the dodo, if you will, until
thank goodness that did not happen to us.
Until the governor stepped in and through executive order extended the plumbing board until 2021.
Yeah.
The reason that's important is there's certain
the inspection report.
So inspectors are not authorized to do certain types of sewer scopes and hydrostatic testing unless they're licensed as a plumber. And there's also a notice, I believe, in one of the contracts that specifically speaks to hydrostatic testing.
That's a tongue twister.
And the plumbing and the need for a licensed plumber to do it. So None of that became an issue due to the governor extending the life of the plumbing board until 2021.
Okay.
We were scrambling, trying to figure out how we were going to address it. And then the governor's office came in June and issued an executive order.
And you actually have a great article. I'll link to it that's published on our website and was in our newsletter. If I can keep plugging that, I will. That covers the details of that. So I'll link it here for you. Okay, does anyone else have any questions, comments, thoughts on the session, our sunset process now? So when is the next time we go through that process?
So in 6 years, per the bill, we've been extended for 6 years, and then we will be re-reviewed in 6 years time. There are reporting requirements that we have to do on a quarterly basis based on our metrics, certain metrics that we're currently reporting on a quarterly basis, and then there's some that are some additional ones we do on an annual basis. Okay. But in terms of the big review, that is
6 years down the road.
Right.
Okay, so and that process. So future things happening at the agency is now we're kind of gearing up for strategic planning.
Right.
In the next year. So the board and commission will start that process in November.
Correct.
And then we'll start. So the work is never done. So even though now we're kind of beyond sunset review process, and that's now the bills, we're now finalizing those changes in our processes. We now kind of move forward to reviewing our processes again and making sure that our agency is continuing to improve. Right. So we're never done with the work. So that's exciting, I guess, and make sure that you follow us for that, because part of that the strategic planning process will be kind of a tour. The agency will go around throughout the state. We'll do some sessions where we meet with everyone and kind of get feedback on specific topics that we're looking at, or that the commissioner board is looking to review. So that's a great opportunity as well to provide your feedback. And we'll probably do one of these kinds of Facebook Lives as well. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. So with that, I don't think we have any other questions, but I just wanted to thank Tony for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
He is very busy, and I know that it was helpful, and hopefully you all found it helpful as well. So and
as Christine said, she'll be posting my email address. If anyone has any questions about anything, please, even if it's not this, just any questions that you think I might be able to answer, any help you are seeking that I might be able to help with, please feel free to reach out to me.
And I will say, Tony is not disingenuous with that. He really will answer your questions. And actually, even our executive director, Doug Oldmixon, he gives out his email address all the time, and we'll add it there as well. We're always here to help. That's our job, is to make sure that people are getting the information they need, when they need it, and how they need it. So go ahead and post your questions or email us anytime. Looks like we have a couple of more. Oh, okay. Just thank yous. Everyone says they really liked the session. So
okay. Thank you for attending.
Yeah. And our next one, just in case anyone's interested, we do these about once a month. We try to do them about once a month for each of our agencies. Today was a combined one, but we try to do it about once a month. Next month, we'll be covering a couple of new topics, including the AMC registry for TALCB. So make sure that if you're an appraiser and you're interested, we'll be covering that topic coming up soon. So a good place to follow along with everything that's happening with the agency is here on our Facebook page. We always share all of our articles and upcoming events on our Facebook page, as well as our Twitter. And then also on our homepage of our Trek website, we have a calendar available now. All of our meetings are posted there. So follow along and make sure that you are subscribed to our newsletter. If I can plug it one more time, I will. And thanks again, you guys, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the session. Bye.
Bye-bye.